I was once nearly murdered when I was 15 years old. The only thing I was really good at was business studies, and that's really where the entrepreneurial journey began. I've sold £200 million of services in 10 years personally. It was just me and a laptop and an idea, a concept. For me, it's about being memorable. One of my tricks was donuts. And in 2019, genuinely, we spent £25,000 on donuts in 1 year. Just go out there and do it.
Hello and welcome to the Lloyds British Business Excellence Awards Beyond the Trophy podcast. We are delighted to be joined by Andrew Hulbert, who is the founder of Pareto FM, who was a finalist in the awards in 2024 in multiple categories. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited about this.
So I just thought it would be good to just learn a little bit more about your business, about the backstory, how you've got to this point, because it's absolutely fascinating.
Thank you.
Just tell me a little bit about, go back as far as you need to. When did it all begin?
Yeah, so I am probably your typical council estate family, working class background, who grew up in a sort of typical family, if you like. My dad was a factory worker for 45 years. My mum was a supermarket worker for 30 years. 2 sisters, it was all very straightforward from that perspective. So we really grew up knowing the value of money and what was important. We didn't have much growing up, but it was all about if you could work hard, you could earn, and you could then get the rewards that would come from that. In my sort of late teenage years, I think I lost my way a little bit and I perhaps got in with the wrong crowd, as they would say. I had some challenges. I was stealing bikes because my first entrepreneurial thing that I used to do. I was buying alcohol for people that I shouldn't have been doing because I could get served very early. And, I had a couple of incidents which shaped me really early on. So I was once nearly murdered when I was 15 years old.
My Lord.
So I was walking through South Parks in Oxford. Oxford, safe place that people think about, walking through South Parks. 3 guys set upon us and beat me up, basically, and tore the ear off the side of my head with a scooter T-bar handle. By some miracle, managed to get up, fight them off, and get myself back to my feet. And instead of calling an ambulance when my ear was literally down here, I called my dad and said, "Hey, Dad, I'm in a little bit of trouble here. Can you come and help me?" He came and picked me up and took me to the hospital, and they sewed my ear back onto the side of my face. And luckily, it could have been a lot worse. But after that, around the age of 15, I was pretty angry and, I was concerned and I wanted to protect myself. So I did start carrying a knife, and I was one of those youths that really, could have got into a lot of trouble at that early stage. And there's a much longer story where I did have the knife on me and I saw the person that had attacked me with the T-bar scooter handle. And I did have a sliding doors moment where it would have been possible to get my own back, if you like, but I decided not to. And luckily, in my sort of very angry 15-year-old self, that was the better decision to make at that stage. After that, I really got quite lucky because I went into sixth form. Now, I wasn't really trying that hard at school, but I did okay on my grades. So with my GCSEs, they got me into sixth form. And really, all that sort of early friendship group that I had leading up to that point, I left behind. And I got in with what I like to call the middle-class rich Oxford kids, and who weren't quite rich enough to go to private school, but they were in Summertown in Oxford to do sixth form. And really, they had aspirations to go to university. They had aspirations to do much bigger things within life. And for me, that was just the crowd that I was then with, and that became quite normal to me. The challenge then became that my parents, who'd worked really hard for their whole lives, they didn't necessarily feel university was the right route for me, because that wasn't where they'd gone through themselves. And I think what happened was a tension grew between the fact that I hadn't really tried that hard at school. And when I became 17, 18, all I really did was organise parties at school and, get to know all the different people from different schools. And this was well before WhatsApp and the internet, so you had to do a lot of organisation. So I had some challenging conversations with my parents about whether I would go or not. They didn't have the money to enable me to go. But very, very, very luckily, they agreed to allow me to go, and they had to try and fund me. So they had to take on additional work themselves and cash in various shares and things so that they could afford for me to go. So when I got to University of Essex on day one, I really felt like I was very lucky to be there. And I really felt like I should get my shit together, frankly, and start to try at that stage. And there is one little bit behind that. The reason I got into Essex was all down to Glastonbury Festival, funnily enough. So I was lucky enough in 2004 to be at the Oasis gig at Glastonbury Festival when they headlined. And that was an amazing place to be, first festival I'd ever been to. And I was there and it was amazing. You know, we were doing things we shouldn't be, and we're 100,000 people singing Champagne Supernova. One of the most amazing experiences of my life. And I do have tickets to Oasis this year to 2 different gigs. But when I got back, we studied something called general studies in our A-levels. Yeah. And general studies was, you didn't have to do any of the lectures throughout the year, you just did the exam. And I literally got back from Glastonbury, I don't think I'd even showered, and I went straight into the exam. And the question was, name a time you've been emotional. And I wrote this essay about the whole thing that I just described, and I got 100% on the essay. Luckily for me, Essex University accepted general studies as a full A-level, and they took me in, and I literally made university by the exact number of UCAS points. So that's how I got in, and that's the whole story leading up to that point. There are so many different challenges that I'd had early on that maybe wouldn't have got me to that stage. But I also, and perhaps most importantly, I met my wife on the very first day of university as we walked into our halls of residence. I held the door open for this beautiful blonde girl, and we ended up being together for the last 20 years. And that really just sort of calmed me down, put me into a great space. And that's when I started to focus. And so really at the age of, 19, 20, I'd had an interesting and colourful life up until that point. But now it was about trying to do something. And the only thing I was really good at was business studies. And that's really where the entrepreneurial journey began.
Tell us a bit more then about, Pareto and how, where that was born out of, and explain to our viewers and listeners who might not know the world of
facilities management.
Facilities management. What is the business and what the market that you operate in?
So really, from an early age, I always knew being my own boss and being a business person and entrepreneur was what I was going to have to do, because I'm an upstart. No one tells me what to do. I think I could do it better than everybody else. And really, having a boss isn't a good thing for me. And I'm sure many entrepreneurs who are listening to this will feel the same way as well. And that's partly what makes us good. When I went to university and I really started to focus on my career and what I was doing, there was a scheme called the Shell Step Scheme back in the day, which put second-year undergraduates with SMEs in their second year of university over the summer. So I applied for that scheme, first time that I'd ever done it, and I just happened to get a place with a facilities management service provider in Chipping Norton near Oxford. Now, there were only 2 people that applied for the job, and I was the only one with a car, and you needed a car to get there. So I got the job with a small company called Rollright, and I did 8 weeks with them. And I worked really well under the finance director there and the sales director, and they really just took me under their wing, and they opened me up to this possibility of the world of work. I did a competitor analysis on the sector for facilities management. So what facilities management really is, it's looking after nice shiny buildings and all the parts that go with that, from the engineering, compliance, health and safety, sustainability, front of house, everything that it takes to run a building. And of course, that could be from hospitals to universities to commercial buildings. But I really had this sort of bit between my teeth around working with tech businesses and sort of fast growth, early adopter type of businesses. So I finished my degree and Rollright took me back on and I went to start with them permanently. And within this sector, there are only 3% of people who come out of university and go straight into facilities management. So I was already slightly different at that stage because I'd approached it from that way. And then I did nearly 6 years with Rollright. And in that time, I worked my ass off. Every opportunity I had, I took. I was working really long hours and I was giving everything I could to that organisation. And it was recognised, and it's great working for an SME because if you work hard, they listen, they show how high you can go. There's lots of promotion opportunities, got loads of pay rises, all that sort of stuff. And then we got bought out by a big German company, a great organisation, who then took Rollright from this sort of £10 million business to an £8 billion business overnight. And that was very challenging for me because all of a sudden I was the king of a small castle in Rollright where I looked after everything to now being part of a much bigger machine. And I was a director there for nearly 2 years and got on really well, great organisation. But after 2 years, I was 27 years old and I just thought, I can't do this any longer. And that is literally then when one day I handed my notice in and left and gave 3 months notice. And then I literally set Pareto up from my bedroom, famously in my pants is the story, which are still in a glass box in my office at the moment, those very pants. And literally it was just me and a laptop and an idea, a concept. I had no money, no funding, no partners, literally nothing. It was just me. And then on this journey we've been on for the last 10 years, it's just been absolutely miraculous during that time. So really how it started, Bulgari, which is obviously an amazing brand, jewellery brand, they built a hotel in Knightsbridge. It was one of the first 6-star hotels in the world.
Yeah.
And I happened to know Jeff, who was the chief engineer, and he got us a contract in there. And Jeff will always be the one that helped me out. You know, when you say, like, what was that moment when it worked? Jeff was the guy. And Jeff, an amazing guy, he's retired now, but he was an older guy. He had 2 young kids that were also entrepreneurs, and he just wanted to help us out. We won a contract with Bulgari, an amazing first place to work for us. What a great name, really modern building, all sorts of modern kit. And then it just started to grow from there. And very quickly we won contracts with Yahoo and Twitter and London Zoo. And like the first 5 or 6 contracts that we had to deliver services were some of the biggest brands in the world. Yeah. And all of a sudden, this story of like this entrepreneur that was trying to grow this modern business, because the challenge with facilities management still today, it's old-fashioned, it's outdated, it's run by people whose ideologies are 40 years old now, and there isn't really that modern approach to it. So when you had this 27-year-old who was making it up as he was going along with these ideas about how we could build teams differently and build services differently, it just caught the imagination of certain people within the sector. And of course, as you start winning more and more brands, it becomes easier to sell to other brands then. And I can't use some of the names, but some of the brands that Pareto went on to support are literally the biggest companies in the world. And we got in really early with some tech businesses like Deliveroo. So we were there with Will Shue in Deliveroo right at the beginning when they were going through a huge growth period. And companies like Candy Crush. Candy Crush was the 2nd most downloaded app in the world at one point. And we were there with them as their little provider, helping them along the way. And even like Twitter. You know, our 5th birthday, which was one of my favourite times in Pareto, Twitter threw the party for us. They threw us the party and paid for everything, free everything, because we were such an amazing partner with them. So no one had really spoken about facilities management in the way that I'm discussing it now. And the other thing was ESG. So ESG really has only become a phrase in the last 5 years or so. But 10 years ago, we came and we said, look, diversity is at our heart. We are going to do everything we can to support every marginalised group. We will build a board of people that's completely diverse so that we give equal opportunities internally. And that just grew and grew and grew. And in the end, we delivered 150 different ESG initiatives in that 10 years. From charity skydiving to making our own honey to planting wild gardens and literally everything in between. And we actually made a consultancy in the end where we used to deliver consultancy services alongside the facilities too. So during that period, we grew. Pareto got to about 18 million turnover after about 6 years. And then a couple of business partners who'd bought in at that stage, they were ready to go, but I wasn't quite finished yet. Now, again, entrepreneurs, when you start a business, you tell everybody you don't want to make a load of money one day, but we want to make a load of money one day. And we probably thought the business was worth about £6 million. And we went out to the market. This is all online, so there's nothing untoward here. We went out to the market and we had offers ranging between 14 million to 20 million for the business. And I will never forget going to bed one night, 11:30 p.m, got into bed, just checking my emails, and literally all these offers had come in. There were 8 offers between 14 to 20 million. And we were like, shit. This is a lot more than what we were anticipating. So the two business partners that wanted to leave at that stage, they were very happy to go and take their money and move on. I wasn't quite done. I thought there was further growth to come within the business. So I took some money and I rolled the rest of my money back in to what we call Pareto 2. So after we had private equity investment, we rolled and I led a management buyout effectively to take us forward. Over the next 2.5 years, we grew from 18 million to 42 million. And the investors exited for a 4.2 times multiple within 2.5 years. We've won awards for that deal in terms of how great the growth was and the growth we've been on. Pareto today is backed by Pictet, so brilliant, large private equity house. We're now on a very aggressive acquisition curve. So we're doing lots of acquisition activity at the moment. And Pareto will continue to grow enormously. Today, I'm a non-exec director of Pareto, so I support the board and I represent the brand and I do all those brilliant things that a founder gets to do. But really, Pareto today will go on to be a £100 million, £200 million business over the next few years. Brilliant backers, brilliant senior management team, and it's going on that continued curve. So for me, it means I've been able to slow down a little bit because I was your typical entrepreneur that was doing 120 hours a week. All I did was sleep and work and nothing else in between. But that's really been the journey. And really, it comes down to hard work, lots of focus, and the ESG angle for us just made a massive difference, because when you're selling to big tech businesses, they take for granted that you can maintain an air conditioning system, but they want all that additional stuff that comes with it.
And so would you say that in terms of a pivotal moment within the business, was it Jeff or was it
Yes, or the private equity?
ESG or private equity?
Jeff, without Jeff, I wonder who my first client would have been. And actually, and after I moved to non-exec, I called Jeff and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know, thank you so much. You probably don't realise what you did for me, but that was the opportunity. It's probably two things. The first client of any business is always a special one. And as entrepreneurs, we're always so grateful for that first one, especially when they pay you. When the money turns up in the account, that's always useful. Probably the private equity was the pivotal moment, because in reality, up to the 18 million mark of turnover, we did everything ourselves. I was your typical micromanager. I looked after everything. If I didn't say it was okay, it didn't happen.
Right.
And whilst entrepreneurs are great, they're also very difficult to work with. And if you get it wrong, it can be really highly strung. And if you get it right, the rewards that come with it are amazing as well. So there are balances. But if you read what some of the team members have said about me online, there's a mixture of those two things. But when we realised the value from private equity into what Pareto was at the time, I think we realised we created something much bigger than what we thought was possible. And then to go from 18 to 42 million in 2.5 years and, achieve the rewards that we did through that, it just showed us that it was possible. And now the platform that Pareto has to grow even further just shows that even with the secondary private equity investment and now the third iteration of Pareto, if you like, there's still loads more value to be made, still changing the sector, still doing something that's different. When I started Pareto, I didn't know what private equity was. And actually someone had to explain it to me a couple of times because it's difficult to understand. And there are lots of negative things written about PE, but actually the two that we've worked with have been brilliant. And if there's any advice I have on private equity, find a house that believes in the values of what you're trying to deliver. Because there are many houses that are very financially driven. Of course, they're there to put money in and take more money out. But actually, if you can find those that represent your values and buy into your values, you won't have to have those difficult conversations as time goes on.
And did you learn that through that process? So, a lot of people do get overwhelmed by the thought of private equity. And you strike me as someone who, once you get on a subject matter, if you find something, you will probably obsessively research that for a long time.
Yes.
And is that what you did with private equity?
It's a good point. Actually, it came down to the advisors. So when you go to sell a business, you appoint commercial advisors who are going to help you to understand all the legal obligations that come with that. And we had a great advisor, a guy called Ian Barton from Quantuma, and I've thanked him publicly since. We hadn't been on a journey before. So really, we needed Ian as our senior advisor to explain the whole process to us as we went through. And that's where we started to hear these stories about, oh no, that private equity, maybe these ones aren't for you because this is their reputation or this is how it worked. But I used to have nightly calls with Fardeen, who was our advisor underneath Ian, and say, right, what does this mean? How do I understand this? What does this mean for me? There's a concept called sweet equity. So sweet equity is equity that's gifted to people, but it only has value on exit, or sometimes called hope shares. So sweet equity was this idea. I didn't know about it. I saw this sweet equity pot was being created. I didn't know what it meant. What were the implications? How much was mine? All those sort of difficult questions. So having a good advisor was really critical. Now, look, you have to pay these advisors, and often their fees will be linked to the value they get from the business. So, but for me, 100% I would advise. And something that I'm personally working on now, having been through two, very, very strict, long, detailed, due diligence-led processes, I do support other businesses now that are looking to go out to market outside of the property management sector because they need help. And entrepreneurs, we're amazing people, but we don't really know what we're doing a lot of the time. We get to that point where you just grow and grow and grow, and then you're like, oh shit, look at all this money we've got, all these people that we hire. And there was that moment before we sold to NVM where I became very aware that we had 200 staff and they were all reliant on the decisions that I was making on a day-to-day basis. And I hadn't felt that pressure until that point. Because then in my head, I'm going, well, they've probably got 5 family members each. There's now 1,000 people that depend on what we do here. Now, we had such a good experience with both private equities that is something I would recommend. But advice. And yes, you can read online, but you'll find 1,000 horror stories about how private equity take over the business, the founders go, they don't let you run it in your own way. I would argue you should make the right choice about which partner that you want to work with and make sure you know who you're going to be partnering with moving forward.
That's really key advice. I think that a lot of our viewers will appreciate that and probably might be calling you afterwards.
Yes.
So completely, on a different subject, what we learned when we met you last year about during the judging process, you came with a lot of delicious biscuits, which were branded with QR codes that led to a link online to show the judges that you'd in fact planted a tree.
Yes, that's right. They each had their own tree. Look, I've sold £200 million of services in 10 years personally. I've been in the room and shaken the hands. Sales is all about being memorable, and for me, it's all about telling stories and having. And the fact you even remember that story is a thing in itself. I also have a massive bee in my bonnet around the bullshit that comes with the green agenda and the wild west of whether things are truly offsetting and whether these trees even exist. We partnered with a company that give you the literal GPS of where your tree is planted, and they're in Scotland. So if anybody wanted to go and see their physical tree, then they could. So all we did was I planted something like 50 trees, each with its own photo and with a GPS coordinate or a what 3 words coordinate. We then printed a QR code on a biscuit, and then gave it to one of the judges and to everyone else who was involved. And you just had to scan the QR code. You found your name on the web page, and then you could see your tree. So all of them had it. But for me, it's about being memorable. And what I used to do in Pareto, one of my tricks was donuts. And I talk about donuts a lot. And in 2019, genuinely, we spent £25,000 on donuts in 1 year. And I genuinely had donut companies calling, asking if they could be our provider of donuts because they'd heard within it. Donuts was something that I haven't really met many people where you give them a donut with their logo on it, they're not excited or thrilled by that in a way that they haven't been before. And this was the early rise of Donut Time when they were doing these freak donuts. So they were much bigger and they had a whole Kinder Bueno on top and all that sort of thing. So we would go down that route. And I tell you what, in really technical services, which we deliver in engineering, there were no other competitors going into a room. Now, often the way we would win work is we would tender against 8 to 10 different businesses. So say a client goes and listens to 10 presentations over 3 days, and you're the one that gave them donuts with their logo on it, who are they going to remember? And, a lot of people talk about the 1% and things. It's just those little things that they're going to remember. What I really like to do, if I'm doing going really over the top, is if I know I'm meeting a certain level of person who's going to be making a decision, I'll research them properly, and then I'll try and usually buy them something linked to their first job. That's one of my other little tricks. So say their first job. I met someone recently, their first job was at Antler, the suitcase maker. Yeah. So I got them a luggage tag from Antler. They hadn't worked there for 30 years, but it's a beautiful orange luggage tag, and it was part of a judging process. And we won the award. Now, I don't know whether that was connected, but it's just those little things, especially as an additional bit to that. If you can give them something they can take away and they may have additional use for at home. So the biscuits, kids love biscuits, right? So kids get the biscuits. Or we used to give away bug hotels and people would put them in their gardens. It's just that thing. It's the film that Will Smith is in, where you're just trying to create all those little cues where people may remember you for different reasons. And that's how I thought about sales. And that's perhaps a little bit different than going in and saying, we're the best engineers, we're the most trained, we're the best at following the process for doing this, that, and the other. It was creating those 1% and those moments that people could remember. I try and do that in lots of aspects of my life to excite people.
Yeah, you can tell. Just to be clear, no bribery is
No, of course, no.
With the
and that's why we're always very open about these things, because actually we want to share, and trees being planted is great for everybody, regardless.
And it leads back to what we were saying about, one of the pivotal moments about separating and putting ESG at the forefront in what could be seen as quite a dull sector, and you were thinking about it ahead of the curve.
Well, just as some facts. So 85% of our membership base are men, for example. Yeah. So and the diversity levels, ethnic diversity levels of that are very low. LGBT plus representation, we don't even know. So there, and neurodiversity representation, we don't either. So within this sector, there's a lot of areas of marginalised groups that were just never supported.
Yeah.
And for me, because of the upbringing I had, being so diverse and so open and different cultures and everything early on, I wanted to bring that, and I wanted to bring it for real, because I saw so much marketing stuff which had lots of people of like ethnic minorities pretending to be engineers on the website. It wasn't true. And actually we wanted to deliver it for real. And when people could cut us in half and see that we were real, that's a really powerful thing to be able to do. But you've got to deliver it. You can't just say it. It has to be very real. And yeah, we have so many stories that are real stories of great things that have gone on that we're able to point at, and it worked really well for us.
So I think, obviously you're incredibly determined in every aspect of your life, it seems. So what does the future look like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've always had this sort of social aspect to me, and I've always tried to help people. And I think when you get to a senior role, there's a lot of responsibility to help people anyway, and go back and help people. I really care about creating legacy now. So I'm 38, right? So hopefully, touch wood, I've got some life left to live. So that's why, go back to planting and stuff. We've planted our own forest now on the land. When I stepped back a little bit from working life just to do non-exec, I bought a farm in Oxfordshire. We have lots of land there, luckily. So yeah, we planted our own forest. So 1,600 trees have gone into our farm. We've labelled lots of the trees with our names of our kids and relatives and dead grandparents and all that sort of stuff. And I love this idea that in 100 years' time, my great-great-grandkids are going to come back and go, my great-grandfather, who was a bit bonkers, planted this forest back in the 20s where we are now, and it'll be this wonderful sort of flourished thing, and they'll be able to go and see it. And also, I've got really into blood donations. It's something that I really like to talk about. Again, not something people talk about a lot. I'm currently one of the biggest blood donors in the whole world. Now, it won't surprise you that, of course, when I put my mind to something, I'm going to be the one that does it better than other people. So yeah, I donate blood on average every 14.7 days at the moment. And because I'm so big, I get 2 bags of platelets and 1 bag of plasma, which is the maximum you can donate each time on the NHS. So literally every 14 days, I donate 3 bags. And each of those bags can save up to 12 people. So you save 36 lives every 14 days. So I've just gone over my 500 mark now in terms of lives saved through the donations. And it's something that, again, most donors are older people because obviously they don't have time during the day. For anyone just around platelet donation, you have to sit on a dialysis machine. So they suck your blood out, take the platelets out and put the blood back in. Much less invasive than giving whole blood. But yeah, so that's enabling us to give lots of donations. And in Oxford, we have the amazing John Radcliffe blood unit there, which is just like world leading for what it does. Of course, doesn't surprise you, every time I go, I take donuts and biscuits for the team that are in there and make sure I get the good appointments and things. So for me, it's just about legacy, and it's so silly, and I'm lucky to have done probably 150 articles now in the press, right? And I've won lots of awards and all those things. But seeing the forest planting in the local Oxford Mail in an ad that's about that big was one of the proudest things I've done in the last few years, because it's got a picture of my nephews on there. And then the stuff, I recently travelled around Europe to raise money for a children's mental health charity called Nays House, for example. So just leaving lots of footprint. And I'm sort of very aware, something I've always done, every birthday and Christmas for my kids, I write them a card. And it's in a box. And when they're 18 years old, they'll get the box and they'll have all the things that are in there. Very conscious about leaving some footprint behind, because we never know what's going to happen, right? And I do a lot of skydiving, so you never know when you're going to hit the ground. And I just it's really important to me that there's a footprint and there's something to find. And of course, if you go on Google and search for Andrew Hulbert, you'll see the Lad Bible thing on there and a picture of me in my pants before and after. But I want there to be more than that. And I think like the forest and the blood and the charity raising, that's important to me now, because I wasn't focused on those things before. And I want my kids to be proud, and I want them to look back at the legacy. And ultimately, I want them to have all this ESG stuff that just oozes out. I want them to be like that as well. And I really will work hard on bringing them up to be open and inclusive. And we won't go into Donald Trump now, but the DEI trends that we're seeing in terms of being rolled back, that's a great concern to me. And I really will work hard with my kids to make sure. For example, we'll often take the kids to watch drag show children's book readings just to try and open their ideas up, so that really early on, they can experience things like that.
Yeah, it's somewhat terrifying what's happening, but we have to remember that we're on this side of the Atlantic, thank goodness. So
yeah, and it's opportunity for me as well. Those who can go even harder on EDI and ESG now will create competitive advantage compared to some companies being forced to roll back. We did an article recently, but that is exactly it. Now is the time for opportunity to go even bigger.
So leading back, you mentioned awards that you've won, and that is obviously how we met as well. So tell me, what in your opinion, what kind of winning an award or even being a finalist in an awards program of this nature, what can it do for a business?
Look, awards are amazing. And they are something that I really care about and something I've put a lot of effort into. We're lucky, we've won 35 odd now, right? So we've been there and done it. There are so many reasons we do it. Number one, just being a finalist and seeing when you're up against some amazing other businesses that are way more established than you, way bigger than you, it just gives you this feeling like, oh shit, really? Are we as good as them? I can't believe we're in the same category as X, Y, and Z. So it legitimizes you immediately for being a finalist. And when you have major names like Lloyds that are running awards, to be even linked to a Lloyds award or any type of that is amazing, because then you can tell customers, oh, did you know that we're linked to this? It also just creates a really positive buzz around the culture of the business, because staff and team members want to be part of businesses that are winning awards, because how amazing that they get to tell their friends and family about it as well. And then, of course, you can't forget the awards night itself. Some of the best nights out, from what I remember of some of them, they are legendary within the Pareto setup. Because for us, we would really celebrate those awards. As an entrepreneur, you often don't celebrate your success, because there's, growth is amazing and everything, but every time we'd win a contract, we'd be like, oh gosh, how are we actually going to deliver it? And that negativity just creeps straight back in. So for us, when we would go out on awards nights, we would buy a whole table. If we won, we would go out and celebrate till the early hours. And there's so many photo booth videos and stuff that we have of ourselves with ties around our head and all sorts of stuff. Just amazing, amazing times. But they create culture, they create great stories, and whatever you're able to share online, they create part of that buzz as well. So for me, also, we have been invited to tender for work based off of where people have seen us up for awards. Because again, on those big brands, it legitimizes who you are as an organization. And sometimes customers and procurement in particular, they look in strange places to find service providers of certain things. So yes, we have been invited because we've won X, Y, and Z or been involved in whatever. And I think also there's just a prestige that goes with it. And when you go into a room, people know that you've won these awards. They know that there's some story to you. It just creates an opportunity for you to have something to talk about. And one of the very first ones I won personally was the Young Leader of the Year back in 2010. And until that point, I didn't really have too much of a brand. I was still working on very early personal brand stuff, but it just thrust me into the limelight, because now people wanted to do interviews with me in 2010, and I was in the magazine and my picture was out there, and I would go to networking events because I was speaking about what the journey had been like with Rollright, going back to those very early stages. And of course, where we've had great success with Pareto, we've been asked to tell the story many times, and especially around ESG. Because of the ESG credentials of what we've delivered, we've been able to win awards way beyond the entrepreneur stuff and the engineering stuff that we do. It's all about actually being a great organisation, and that's just worked brilliantly. So for anyone who's considering it, 1000% put some effort into doing it, because I'm not saying get AI to write your award entries, because you shouldn't, because that's not going to give a legitimate version of who you are. But it is easier to write award entries now, as long as you put the effort in with the detail and the flow and the real accomplishments of what you've done. And often as entrepreneurs, we don't look back and go, oh, we grew 300% between there and there. That's quite an interesting thing. Let's talk about that. So I think that the ability to apply for awards is better, but we cannot rely on lazy tactics like AI these days. You have to make sure that it's legitimate and you can feel it. Because I'm an AI prompt engineer. I freelance for various companies. What AI is not brilliant at doing is adding the emotion that comes with running a successful business. So for anybody that's just trying to throw stuff in that doesn't have that, it's going to be wooden, it's going to be boring, the judges are going to see straight through it. You need to make sure you're putting your heart into it and telling those stories that are going to bring it to life. So I just think the ability to apply, I would also just say, like, invest in a decent graphic design company or a decent graphic designer within your business, because I know everyone doesn't like to say it, but how it looks can enhance the words so much more. And if you just put a blank Times New Roman set of text in, compared to someone who's got something designed up, and it's not that expensive to do that on Fiverr and things, you can get really good deals now. Should be how you do it. If you're gonna go for it properly. There's no point just limping in, with a terrible ChatGPT written article that's not designed. You may as well do something a bit better.
Good advice. I think, looking back at your career so far, I think there's probably still so much more to come.
Yes.
But what would you do differently? Would you have done any of it differently?
Yeah, do you know what? I don't know. I would have done. There are times that were hard, and there are times where there's a lot of pressure. And probably my advice to myself would be to have hired good people earlier. So when we got to the 18 million before we had private equity investment, we hadn't invested in anything. I was still doing probably 7 or 8 jobs at that stage. It was a silly amount. After we had the private equity investment the first time round, they said, look, we're going to grow this business to 40 million or whatever. We need people that are going to help us do it. And we invested £1 million in our overhead just after the deal was done, which was an amazing thing to do from the investor's perspective, because that was a big gamble for them to take after buying the business in the first place. I'm convinced if we would have hired those people earlier, we probably could have accelerated the journey that we'd been on. However, the people, by not doing that, and the people we found when we did find them were the most amazing group. And look, this is an amazing stat. So when I ran Pareto up until I stepped down as CEO, a senior manager had never left the business in nearly 10 years. So every hire we made on a senior management level, which was nearly 17 people in the end, not a single one left. And recruitment is such a good focus, and something I've always been able to do. As you could imagine, I'm not your technical recruiter, right? If someone comes in, I'm not really looking at the CV. I want to have a chat to them. I'm way more interested. What do you do outside of work?
Yeah.
Why do you want to earn money? What challenges do you have that's going to make it difficult for you to work within our environment? Tell us about your kids or your family or your dog. What is it that you're about? Because I found if you could create that connection with people and make an assumption on what I thought was going to be important to them, then that's how you build a great team. And, we were very lucky for that 10-year journey that we went on. We got it right 17 times in a row. And that's when the sweet equity gets given to those people, and that's how they create value from the business as well. I think I probably should have recruited earlier. But even though we didn't, we still went on a journey we were really happy with, and we met some amazing people that will be lifelong friends, and people that made good returns through working with the business as well.
So, talking to your younger self, what advice would you give? One piece of advice would you give to your younger self looking back now? I
think probably just bloody do it. Just go out there and do it. I think there's so many reasons that you don't do things, and so many reasons you get held back, and there's so much doubt in your mind. Just do it. Just jump, both feet first, see if the parachute opens afterwards. But yeah, just go for it, because the land of opportunity is out there for you, but you have to take the first step. No one is going to do that for you. So yeah, just go for it.
Andrew, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you a little bit more and chat today. I think we could do a whole separate section on private equity and learning about sweet equity and all these different things that a lot of people just have no idea about. Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. And I'm sure there's much more success to come your way.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thanks.